got the cornfield calm, Midwest tone, but he's spitting facts like a dog with a bone. Lanky frame, fire-haired, eyes on the case, breaking down the game and the darkest place. Sports scores to murder boards, Hoosier logic cuts like swords. From Friday lights to chalked out lines, this redhead's brain rewrites the lines inside the Hoosier mind, where the stories twist and stats unwind. He's a legend in flannel, mic in hand, digging deep where few can stand. From touchdowns to crime scenes raw, he's got the truth in every draw. Yeah, step in if you dare to find what's brewing inside the Hoosier mind. He'll talk Pacers, Colts, or Colts on trial. Hoosier humor with a devilish smile. He's that redhead sleuth with a box of clues. Takes your headline, breaks the news. With every stat and every scream, he's painting portraits in your stream. Don't blink, he'll tie it tight. From game night wins to murder fight. Inside the Hoosier mind, where the facts hit hard and the lines are blind. He's a ginger ninja, smooth and slick, cracking cases play by play quick. From courtrooms to the hardwood floor, he digs for more than just the score. Tune in and don't rewind, you're deep now inside the Hoosier mind.
All right, what's up, y'all? Welcome into Inside the Hoosier Mind, brought to you by Military Broadcast Radio, helping give veterans a voice. Back from a crazy weekend of college football, and especially a crazy weekend of college football if you're like me and you're an LSU fan, or if you're just a college football fan in general and you kind of like the controlled chaos that is college football, because we have yet another Power 4 coach firing in Brian Kelly being released by the LSU Tigers, as well as the offensive coordinator, Joe Sloan, as well, which is much needed. It's crazy how all of that went down, but we'll get into that. We'll break all that down. We'll talk about it and whatnot. And it's something that's happened for quite a while. Of course, now with that, there's now even more coaching rumors of who would want to take the LSU job. Is there somebody that's maybe in line to fill another job that might be in contention, or somebody who got fired, and maybe we just have one big carousel of coaches, just, old faces in new places type of thing. You got to love college football just for that, because you never know what you're going to get out of it. You never know what to expect. And honestly, anything is possible. Absolutely anything is possible. And honestly, that was the big highlight for me this entire weekend, was Brian Kelly getting fired and all of the drama that went on behind that. So if you are an LSU fan, or if you just want to know, okay, why did Brian Kelly got fired? I don't really follow LSU, what in the world? There's a lot of culminating factors that go into it. The biggest thing as far as simplification goes is Brian Kelly did not fit the LSU culture and the culture of Louisiana, because both LSU and LSU and Louisiana as a whole are so deeply integrated with each other as far as the love and care that they have. You have to be willing to accept both. And if you don't, you'll be ostracized and you'll be miserable. And by the looks of it, Brian Kelly did his best to ostracize himself from the rest of LSU. He didn't truly accept the culture. He didn't truly accept the school and who they were. And as a result, that's what ultimately ended up getting him fired. And here's the other thing too with the whole Brian Kelly thing, because I'll be honest, when I first saw that he decided to leave Notre Dame and come to LSU, I was fairly happy. And I say that because he has had success as a head coach. He did take Notre Dame to a national title, albeit they lost in said national title. He still got them there. And so, okay, we'll see how this ultimately ends up going moving forward and whatnot. Well, he comes to LSU, and in his first year, he manages to take LSU They win the SEC West, which was really a shocking outlier more than anything. Nobody really expected for that to happen, but he ends up winning the SEC West, and he ends up facing in the SEC championship the soon to be national champion Georgia Bulldogs, and they get routed pretty easily, but he finishes 10-3. And keep in mind too, for anybody who doesn't really follow college football, maybe you're more of an NFL type of person, and that's okay. To give you an idea of the talent that Brian Kelly had as a head coach, and he didn't even make the playoffs with these now NFL players. Jaden Daniels was his quarterback. Malik Neighbors was one of his wide receivers. Brian Thomas Jr. was one of his wide receivers. You also had Mason Taylor, now tight end for the Jets. A little bit underrated, didn't get as much hype or as much, I would say national recognition as, Tyler Warren and whatnot, but he wasn't used as much of a gadget player and didn't really show as much versatility as a gadget player as Tyler Warren did. So to each their own as far as credit goes. That was just his offense, as well as, he had star left tackle Will Campbell as well the entire time he has been at LSU. So that's what Brian Kelly gets coming into the job and leading the Tigers to start with. He leads them into the SEC championship, and they ultimately lose 50-30. And then they turn around, they beat Purdue 63-7, and they finish 10-4 on the season to start his time at LSU. Now, if you're an LSU fan, and if you're like me, who with LSU, there is a level of realism. And I would say that for really any team throughout college football, and you could even make the argument a lot of professional teams too, and you can make this argument for really any sport. You have the teams that are the dynasties that are always kind of the heavyweight favorites. Their expectations are all but championship or bust, or at least make an appearance type of thing. For LSU, they're just good enough. They at least expect to be in the playoffs. You don't have to make a deep run. You don't have to go to the national title. You don't even have to win the national title. As long as you at least make it into the playoffs and get a shot and just go from there, people will be happy. So you start off your time there. You go 10-4. You do lose a pretty close game to Florida State. And again, kind of keeping with the quote unquote curse of LSU there for a little bit after winning the national title, they lost 5 straight season opening games until this season. You lose in a close one to Florida State. Not great, but not bad. Florida State ends up going on in that season to be, absolutely fantastic. So not a terrible thing. You end up, you get a big win over Ole Miss. You lose to Texas A&M during the season. Then you go on to face Georgia. You get dominated. But you also had a win over Alabama, who was number 6 at the time. That's great. That can get you pretty far. So this is season 1 for him. Already off to a good start. The expectations are you should get better. We should be able to go a little bit farther. Didn't make the playoffs this year. We expect to be a playoff team next year. And keep in mind, this is with a 4-team playoff, so any type of loss is going to hurt. They start 2023, they're ranked number 5. They once again lose to Florida State, but they lose in even worse fashion than they did before. They win 3 consecutive games, then they lose to Ole Miss. Not great, not bad. They win another 3 games, 6-2. Then they defeat Mizzou, who was undefeated at the time. Then they get blown out by Alabama. So ultimately, this ends to them being 10-3 once again the next year. Keep in mind, he still had Jaden Daniels. He still had Malik Neighbors. He still had Brian Thomas Jr. You still have a solid core of players those 2 years. Now, the unfortunate part is, okay, now Jaden is leaving for the NFL, as well as Malik Neighbors, as well as Brian Thomas Jr. So now what do you look like 2 seasons in? You had great star players. The defense, though, was probably the weakest link of both teams. Now we come into the 2024 season. They lose the season opener to USC last year. They ultimately finish 8-4. They did get a big win over Ole Miss in overtime with Kyron Lacey, but ultimately they finished 8-4. Not really impressive. They did defeat Baylor in the bowl, which, even the year before they beat Wisconsin in the bowl game, which, yes, you win a bowl game. Yes, it's another game to add on to the statistics, but it's not bowl games that truly matter, because if you're not in the playoff bowl games are just kind of there to see, what do my freshmen look like? What do some of my sophomores look like? What do some of the guys look like that we're going to expect, hopefully, to still be on the team next year? And hopefully, what do they look like with our future moving forward? So this is all in the first few years as far as his actual coaching goes. This year starts off with a big win against Clemson. Clemson's a preseason favorite to potentially go to the national title game. Defense absolutely stout. They get a win. They get another couple of wins. Then the big showdown with Ole Miss. They lose to Ole Miss, kind of humiliating fashion. As an LSU fan, I can tolerate losing to Ole Miss. They're considered a top 10 team. They jumped up to number 4 after the win. They lose to Georgia. Then they come back and they beat a pretty good Oklahoma team. So that's not as bad. Again, I can accept that and not go too crazy. Now, the one where people get really iffy is the Vanderbilt loss. And I get that. Again, for anybody who watches college football, Vandy has been one of the doormat SEC programs in college football for years. I mean, generational of just bad Vandy football teams for years. Like, it had been 1990 since the last time Vanderbilt had beat LSU. Long time. I mean, heck, it was 1984 since the last time they beat Alabama, to, again, give you an idea of how long Vandy has been bad forever. Last couple of years, Vanderbilt has been the Cinderella program. So they've been entertaining to watch. They've been solid. They got the big upset win against Alabama last year in Nashville. So it's okay. This is a solid team. This is a team that can compete. They basically brought all but everybody back. And now this year, they kept it close against Alabama. They ultimately ended up losing, but kept it close. They then turn around. They beat LSU and kind of beat LSU convincingly. But then they don't storm the field, even though they beat a top 10 team in LSU, because LSU was still ranked in the top 10 at the time. That is indicative of the level of respect Vanderbilt had for LSU being a top 10 team coming into their building and losing. And Vanderbilt doesn't even storm the field. And keep in mind, this is a fan base that has not experienced a lot of success ever. Like, there's parents, there's even grandparents that really haven't experienced Vanderbilt success, and they don't even storm the field for beating a top 10 team in LSU. That's troublesome. That's really worrisome. But the biggest issue that was with Vanderbilt, as it was with the Ole Miss loss, they have trouble containing a mobile quarterback. It seemed like even though the defense was struggling, the defense was keeping them alive. They were getting stops. They were keeping things at least close. The offense has been absolutely horrible this year. Vanderbilt, kind of the same thing. Defense kept them in. They were kind of having trouble containing Diego Pavia, but it also doesn't help once your defense is on the field for so long. Your offense goes on the field and either immediately turns the ball over, or they do a quick 3 and out, they punt, and now your already tired defense is having to go back out there to try to make plays and try to keep you in the game still, and eventually they're going to get worn down. And then comes Texas A&M this past Saturday. They already had the issue last year of losing to Texas A&M in a really humiliating fashion. And really, last year is also what ultimately that Texas A&M game stopped them from having any momentum as far as, okay, we still have a shot to make the playoffs, because they already had a couple losses at that point. And with the loss to Texas A&M, that all but knocked them out. And now they come in again. Last year they were ahead at halftime. LSU was. Texas A&M roars back. This year they're on the road in Baton Rouge at LSU at nighttime, one of the most difficult stadium environments to play in at night. About the only team that has ever had success doing that has been Alabama, led by Nick Saban and whatnot. So that gives you an idea of the level of greatness that is LSU, that only one team has really had any type of success, and it's their biggest rival. And Texas A&M is able to come in at half down by 4, and Texas A&M then drops 35 unanswered points on LSU. Their last score was a just garbage time touchdown to at least make the score more respectable, and only make it a 24-point loss instead of a 34-point loss. So, 31-point loss. Sorry, can't math very well. 31-point loss potentially. And keep in mind, their quarterback did the exact same thing this year as he did last year. He wasn't really great at throwing it. He was 12 of 21, 2 touchdowns. He had 2 picks for 200 yards, but he ran for 100 yards and also had 2 rushing touchdowns to boot. That's really it. That's all they had to do, was just run the ball. They didn't really have to do much of anything else. They just had to run it. And for Texas A&M to not only do that, they come to Baton Rouge and do it. And then there was kind of that weird, funky aura about that entire game, especially after halftime, because fans are already kind of on edge. LSU's able to, at least put points on the board before half. They go up. Now, usually Tiger fans are going to be pretty optimistic. Like, okay, we're ahead. We have a shot. We're ahead by 4. We've made some mistakes, make some, halftime adjustments, come back out. We'll be okay. Not even close. And it's really sad, because Texas A&M gets the ball. They go down, they score. Now it's 21-18. Again, that's manageable. We can handle that. What really got it was the punt return for a touchdown by KC Concepcion. It was 79 yards, and Texas A&M went up by 10. That was the nail in the coffin. There was no shot that LSU was going to be able to come back. They get the ball not very much later, and they scored 2 touchdowns in less than 2-minute drives on both. Like, it didn't take Texas A&M hardly any time. Their longest drive, Texas A&M's, was just under 5 minutes. Like, you have to think about that. Like, most drives can take a while. It takes a minute to really, get through there. And obviously there's, timeouts, there's TV timeouts, there's commercial breaks, et cetera, et cetera. There's injury timeouts. So some drives don't take necessarily as long. But if you're scoring in basically what is a 2-minute drive twice, at least, that's a problem. That is a huge problem. And from that third quarter moving on, you started to see LSU students leave. You started to hear the chants of "Fire Kelly." You started to hear people losing the faith in Brian Kelly exponentially quickly. And to be fair, it is 100% warranted. And I know I kind of jumped into his records to start. His entire time at LSU did not start off very pretty. Now, again, people were optimistic when he came in, because he does have a pedigree of being a good coach as far as his overall winning record and whatnot. I will say, living here in Indiana, coming back after being gone for so long, and basically him coming to LSU about the same time I was getting out of the military. So about the time that he's leaving Notre Dame, he leaves Notre Dame. He's 92-39. Pretty decent as far as, being a head coaching record and whatnot. Now, obviously, he had some pretty embarrassing losses in championship games and whatnot when it mattered most. But it is what it is. It happens. And you think, okay, he's coming in. He's got a good coaching pedigree. He's got everything he could potentially need. LSU's great at recruiting. They obviously are able to get good talent. There's never been an issue with that. He should be successful. He comes to a basketball game, and he puts on this weird, what's supposed to be like a Southern Louisiana Bayou accent. And that's kind of the first thing of it's a little cheesy. It's a little corny. But again, you can remedy that by winning. You can solve a lot of issues if you win. That's no big deal. And again, you start off, you're 10-4. You go to the SEC West, you go to the SEC championship, no big deal. Okay, there's potential. And again, the next year, you even go 10-3. Again, there's potential. Like, all right, he's getting 10 wins where he's almost there. He's got to get it over the hump. You're bringing in a quarterback that has been sitting behind Jaden this whole time. He's been in your system now for a couple years. He looked good in the bowl game against Wisconsin. Should be fine. No issues. The year he comes in, they go 9-4. Only a 1-game drop off. Not the end of the world. Your quarterback throws for over 4,000 yards, over 20 touchdowns, but he throws 12 picks. It's first year starting. That's, again, manageable. Okay, he can recruit. He's got the talent. There's a ton of potential and opportunity there. Now come into this year. What's the biggest thing they needed to fix? They needed to fix the defense. He gets a great defensive, well, he actually keeps the same defensive coordinator. They spend buku money on the transfer portal to get people to come in, and it's more than paid off as far as the style and the ability and the talent that they have on the defense right now at LSU. And everything reversed. You went from having prolific top 10 scoring, top 10 passing, top 10 everything offenses to you're now in the bottom of college football. You are in like the bottom quarter of college football statistically on offense because it's that anemic. And you have a top 10 defense. It makes zero sense as to his overall managerial style. Like I said, the coming in, you have the fake Louisiana accent. And the other thing that's weird that has now been reported post everything is there's a lot of LSU alumni that did not want to come to some of the LSU games. And keep in mind, a lot of these guys, especially the older ones that play more for just the pride of being at LSU, enjoying the good times that they had at Death Valley, enjoying all the good times that they had there in Baton Rouge with all of those great teams and other great players. For there to be that many that say, I really don't want to go because of that guy being head coach, that's a problem. Like, that's a huge problem. I get if it's like 1 or 2, no big deal. There is a lot of LSU alumni that did not care for him, that did not like coming there because he did not fit the LSU culture. And that is unfortunately his biggest undoing is his inability to be himself, but accept Louisiana and accept LSU, even, embrace it. You don't have to go out of your way. You don't have to be the crazy guy that's, trying to speak Creole or trying to eat everything Cajun or, oh yeah, come on down here to the bayou, be another Coach O. Like, Coach O could do it because that's who Coach O is. That's where Coach O grew up. That's where Ed Ogeron lives and breathes, is because he is from Louisiana. Like, that's what he knew. That's what he grew up with. Brian Kelly's from New England. You did not grow up anything similar to that. You did not grow up with it. There's nothing similar to what you did there at Cincinnati or even at Notre Dame. As far as the Midwest, it's not the same as the South, and it's definitely not the same as everything else. Joy sources say ties to LA Mafia up to the governor. And that is a crazy part, because there is a report that even the governor of Louisiana is getting involved with this potential buyout issue as far as his contract goes. Now, I have heard a lot of different things, so keep in mind, these are all rumors. These are all reports that I've read over the last few hours and last couple of days as far as his overall buyout. There were reports that supposedly he's already settled with LSU because of a morals contract. And essentially what the morals contract is, that if LSU feels that, Brian Kelly was not representing them in the best possible way, in a representation that the school and or organization would feel is doing them best of service, that they don't have to fully pay him for everything. Now, there's some verbiage that depending on how bad the situation is, they could even say just termination and void everything. For Brian Kelly, it's not as bad as, oh, he's, just an awful human being, just void all of it. They can't do that. He didn't do anything truly that bad to the organization, but he didn't exactly make them look the greatest. And yeah, Joy, I think, again, the reports I've read, he supposedly settled anywhere between 20 and 30 million. Potentially about half of the 53 to 54 million that I've heard as far as the actual buyout goes. They're still supposedly, the Louisiana reps and whatnot are sitting down to try to figure that out. And like I said, even the Louisiana governor is coming in to step in, because the governor has had the big issue with, they already announced that they were going to start raising ticket prices, concession prices, everything like that for LSU games to start with. And I think the governor took a little bit of kind of offense to that, but that also gives you an idea, and Joy knows better than I do, of how deeply integrated LSU is in truly the state of Louisiana. And you have to think of it, even though Louisiana has a professional basketball team and a professional football team in the Saints and the Pelicans, LSU is still their bread and butter. That's still the pride of Louisiana, is LSU and the Tigers. So it's crazy how quickly things have escalated with this, and how quickly this has gone, and how far it has gone. And yeah, Louisiana is deep in shady. Absolutely. Because here's the other thing that's weird with this too. And again, this I think is what makes this so uncomfortable for a lot of people just watching from the outside, probably even more so internally, is that everything is so deeply connected. And Brian Kelly did not really get along with anybody. But it is primarily the payout, because LSU sitting here, they owe him $54 million. They're trying to do a settlement. Whether or not he'll take that is another question. The other thing that makes it a pain is if actually it doesn't make it a pain, it does make it potentially better as far as the overall sting of having to pay him, is if he does get another coaching job, right? So let's say one of these openings in college football decides they want to take a chance on Brian Kelly and hire him as their head coach. Whatever they pay, LSU only has to pay the difference. So, they owe him 53 to 54 million. And, let's say somebody hires him for, 26 to $30 million. Then they only owe him 24 to 28 million. Still a good chunk of change, not as bad as 54 million though, and potentially more. The other thing that led to this that makes this weird is supposedly, Scott Woodward, who is the athletic director, who I'm going to get into him in a second, is the attention was brought up of Brian Kelly needed to make a change. They wanted him to fire Joe Sloan, the offensive coordinator. He said no. And that to me is kind of the first weird thing. Your boss comes to you, says, look, your offense is struggling. You've had 8 games to figure it out. And now we're sitting here at 5-3. The last game was an absolute embarrassment, especially considering it was at Death Valley, and you let them score 49 points and you could only respond with 25. If it's a close, shootout game, no big deal. I don't think they're having as bad of talks or discussions. You got blown out. It was essentially 49 to 18 until the garbage time touchdown. You got blown out. There's no denying that. There's no getting around that. He supposedly didn't want to fire him. He also said that he wanted to fire. Brian Kelly said he wanted to fire the O-line coach. And the athletic director said, I don't want you to fire your O-line coach. Your O-line coach doesn't, the O-line needs work, but they're young. There's potential there. There's a lot of prospects. Why are you going to fire your O-line coach when your offensive coordinator is the one calling the plays and is the one that's having the issues? And supposedly Brian Kelly then escalated it to a furious rage, supposedly. And that's ultimately what led to his overall dismissal, was that conversation. Now, I have heard other things that supposedly the situation was similar to the Jamal Adams thing with the New York Jets before he found out that he was traded. Supposedly Brian Kelly tried to come in Sunday to, go into the office, sit down, try to figure things out, try to start, working on plans to try to fix and turn the season around, and supposedly was not able to get in, ended up having to have someone let him in, and it moved on from there. I don't know how true that is because, again, Jamal Adams is also from LSU from years prior. So I don't know if someone's just trying to play a coy copy on that story or not. Um, the other two things actually that involve Scott Woodward, who's the athletic director for LSU, there's two problems with him that I really have. One, the Louisiana governor, Jeff Landry, came out and had to intervene in the process without Woodward being involved, according to a report by WFAB, who is a local TV station down there in Baton Rouge, because LSU reps are working to reduce the $54 million buyout, reportedly trying to cut that total in half to about $27 million. So when your governor is in there with your college reps, as far as we need to figure out about not paying them, but your athletic director is not, that's an issue. But the other thing that's an issue to me that I feel truly needs to happen is Scott Woodward also needs to be released from the team. And I say that because keep in mind, again, for anybody who's not a college football fan, for anybody who doesn't follow it, Scott Woodward was the athletic director for Texas A&M when they gave Jimbo Fisher that massive contract. Texas A&M cut him, and then they had to pay $77 million to Jimbo Fisher. Now he has to pay Brian Kelly almost $53 to $54 million. Scott Woodward is responsible for two coaches getting $130 million in buyout money to stop them from coaching. And he is still an athletic director of a Power 4 university and was not involved in the talks with the LSU reps and the governor of Louisiana as far as paying Brian Kelly out. Exactly. That is true insanity that this guy can even still have a job, still be considered for a job just from that. And again, to me, why do you have a job? Like, if you look at Texas A&M's overall success that they had, 8-4, 8-5, 8-4, 8-5. They even at one point supposedly had Texas A&M. Their nickname was Texas 8-4. Like, every time comes to LSU. Now, again, for me, behind the scenes, obviously I don't see everything behind the scenes, but I'm looking at it as a fan like, wait a minute, you don't exactly have a great track record to start with as far as being an athletic director, or at least what you did with Texas A&M. And for anybody who, they hear that like, oh, well, Texas A&M solid this year. Texas A&M is solid this year. I'm not going to deny that by any stretch of the imagination. my issue though is Texas A&M has a ton of money. They have a ton of boosters, right? And they're able to mitigate that fairly well. Now, respect to LSU. LSU also has boosters and they have money because obviously they are very deeply connected within the community and whatnot. But it's just nuts that he gets to do that. Texas A&M fires him, lets him go, and I didn't know this about Scott Woodward till I just looked it up. He's not only the AD of LSU, apparently he was born in Baton Rouge, and his alma mater is LSU, which is insane. I get why they'd want to bring him back, but again, your body of work was not exactly great to start with. Supposedly, in 2000, he was hired by LSU Chancellor Mark Emmert to serve as the Director of External Affairs at LSU. And he supposedly helped serve in the role. Oh, he was hired by new president, University of Washington, Mark Emmert, for the position of Vice President of External Affairs and served in the role until 2008. In 2007, he was Washington's acting athletic director, became the AD from 2008 to 2016, went to Texas A&M from 16 to 19, and then has been with LSU since 19 to currently. So technically, let's see, when he hired former Baylor women's head coach Kim Mulkey. So he did help bring a national title to the women's team. But apparently he is the one who let Ed Ogeron go as far as his head coaching and whatnot. And he's the one who hired Brian Kelly and paid him a ton of money. During his time at Texas A&M, though, he helped hire Jimbo Fisher, hired Buzz Williams from Virginia Tech to be Texas A&M's new men's basketball coach, and helped get a new track and field stadium and a softball stadium. During his time, every sports teams participated in the postseason. Aggies won 9 SEC titles, including baseball, men's basketball, soccer, women's swimming, diving 3 times, men's tennis twice, and men's outdoor track and field. So he's had success as an AD, but I'll say at least from a football perspective, there's a lot to be desired there. We'll put it that way. And he actually even hired Steve Sarkisian to be Washington's head coach back in the day, back in 2013. So he can be good at his job. And I think the Brian Kelly thing and the Jimbo Fisher thing is really what gets him. So I still have questions because the amount of money that you dish out. But again, my biggest question is, why are you not being talked to about this, right? Like, LSU wins a national title with Ed Ogeron. He loses a ton of talent to the NFL. That following year, it's a crap year. It's also COVID, and you decide to let him go and you fire him. That to me is crazy. The guy wins you a national title, has one bad year, the following year says, nope, you're out. Goodbye. That's nuts. So now LSU's in the market for a head coaching search, and there's the kind of interesting and good thing about that is there's now a ton of rumors of who's going to be the guy that replaces Brian Kelly. Who's going to be the guy. So one of the big fish is Lane Kiffin. There's rumors that they think they might try to be able to steal Lane from Ole Miss and from Florida as well. Some of the other ones that are potentially named, according to 104.5 ESPN in Baton Rouge, these are supposedly the betting odds for the next head coach to be at LSU. John Summerall from Tulane leads the pack. Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator for Buffalo Bills, who helped lead Joe Burrow and whatnot to that national title, is second. Lane Kiffin is third. James Franklin is fourth. No, just personally, no. He could not win the big game at Penn State. Penn State had equally talented, you could even argue more talented players. Could not do anything with it. Could not beat Ohio State. Barely beat Michigan, and was 0-2 against the Ducks. Would not want it. No, thank you. Eli Drinkwitz from Mizzou. Jeff Brom from Louisville. I wouldn't exactly be opposed to either one of them, but again, Jeff Brom has a tendency of beating top 10 teams, with teams like Purdue and Louisville, which is great. He can coach. But again, neither of his teams really make the playoffs. They're not really doing anything that's making me personally turn my head of, oh yeah, I think that might be the guy. Brent Key from Georgia Tech. I don't think that'll happen. He's a Georgia Tech alumni. He's got that program going great. And obviously I've talked about in the past, for some of these coaches that finally get something established and really have success, trying to do that all over again, not exactly the best move in my opinion. Jimbo Fisher is after that. Ironic. Who's currently working for SiriusXM and getting paid a ton of money from Texas A&M. Clark Lee from Vanderbilt, don't think that's going to happen. He's pretty loyal to Vandy, and kind of the same thing. I don't think he'd want to leave what he's been able to build there. Marcus Freeman from Notre Dame. Supposedly Marcus Freeman has turned down. He did turn down Florida. He turned down one other major school that was supposedly in the hunt for him, and I can't remember which one it is. I don't think Marcus Freeman would leave for LSU, to be completely transparent. Urban Meyer is at plus 2,500. Again, I don't really see it. He seemed happy with Florida. He definitely seemed very happy with Ohio State. He still had connections and is pretty happy with his time at Utah. I think he realized after the Jacksonville thing, coaching is definitely it's not coaching the same type of players or kids as it once was. And I think he would struggle with that now. And then, of course, Nick Saban, there's always calls to try to get him to potentially come home to LSU for a reunion there. So some of the hires I wouldn't necessarily be upset about. I think I would probably like Joe Brady more just to see what he's got, especially with what he's been able to do with Josh Allen, what he did do with Burrow and that offense as a whole. I think he would be more inclined because he has been at LSU and experienced success, and he got to learn from Coach Orgeron, how to truly accept Louisiana and be at LSU. So I think he would be fine. Lane, I don't know if he'd necessarily want to leave Ole Miss for that. I know I went on a rant about that my last show about him leaving Ole Miss for Florida. But again, the dollar is what speaks the most with a lot of these coaches and a lot of these situations is how much you're willing to pay me. I might be willing to go anywhere. Another name that I would probably throw out there that I don't know is necessarily realistic. I think it would be interesting. I think he is the type of guy that would be more inclined to be accepting of LSU and have more fun with it. And he's even mentioned that he would like to get back into coaching, and that specifically he would like to coach college football in the SEC. And that would be John Gruden. I know a lot of people have kind of mixed feelings about John Gruden, which I completely understand and get. I don't think it kind of hurts to even entertain. The guy can coach. He's entertaining. If anybody has watched him, even in just some of the speeches that he has with some of the colleges around the country, he's motivating, and it seems like the guys respond to him very well. Again, just in like team meetings and whatnot. Now, would that necessarily correlate to success at LSU? Who knows? I think if anything, the Raiders are kind of indicative of he was really struggling. That kind of their really is when he came back to the Raiders as a whole, they struggled. His offensive line was always a mess. The defense was fairly solid. I mean, he helped draft guys like Max Crosby and whatnot. So, I mean, he can get pieces and players, but there is a little bit of a question mark as far as how good could you really do, and how does he respond to being in the NFL, and not the NFL, how does he respond to being in college and dealing with NIL and doing with recruiting and whatnot. One name that I personally think should come back, I think honestly they should bring Ed Orgeron back, and there's some LSU fans that disagree with that. There's some that agree. I say bring Coach O back. One, again, he lives and breathes Louisiana. LSU loved him. He won them a national title. They were entertaining. He's fun to watch. He's a great storyteller. He's fun to talk to, and he's a down-to-earth guy. And he even said that in a podcast now. He thinks now with NIL, you still have to recruit, but now a lot of it's, like, hey man, one, how much do we have to pay you to come here? Two, do you want to be LSU Tiger? What do you want to get to win? And he has the championship pedigree. I mean, if you listen to any of his conversations, he learned under some of the greats. He learned under Jimmy Johnson with Miami. He learned under Pete Carroll at USC. He learned from his mistakes at Ole Miss when he had his own shortcomings, and then he comes to LSU as the head coach, and ultimately is able to turn the program around and have great success. I don't see it as a bad thing if you bring him back, all honesty. I think if you do, It brings a revitalized life back to LSU. It gives honestly an entertaining guy, and it's somebody that can say, look, look at all the guys that I help recruit that are in the NFL and are absolute studs at their position. Like, do you think Ed Ogeron's going to have any issue getting a wide receiver when he can say, hey, look at look at Jamar Chase, look at Justin Jefferson. Those two guys, I help get them here at LSU, and they're stars. And their quarterback, oh yeah, number 9 in Cincinnati, Joe Burrow, won a national title with him when he was just a backup basically for Ohio State for a long time. Comes here to LSU for a couple of years, lights the league up. I don't think Ed Ogeron would have any issues doing that whatsoever if he was to come back to LSU. So yeah, I did not expect to go off for 45 minutes about LSU's firing of Brian Kelly. I'll be honest, I thought this was going to be a really short show about all of that, to be fully transparent. I was like, well, we'll see. This might be a short show. I don't know if I'll be able to talk about it for 45 minutes, and here we are. But it is crazy. It's crazy more than anything. Just looking at some of the rest of college football, again, to do a little bit of a recap, IU absolutely dominated UCLA, kind of stopped that streak that they were on as far as, finally getting big wins, upsetting teams that nobody really expected. IU, and now again, they just beat UCLA. I'm not going to sit here and say, IU is for sure the number 2 team in college football right now, but they do have a quality win against Oregon. Oregon's also a quality team. Now, again, a lot of people are going to make the argument, oh, well, who's Oregon faced? Oregon's best win is against the Penn State team that's no longer ranked and has also just completely fallen, down in the dumps. And Indiana just has a win against them. So a little bit of a surprise. I'm still excited to see how it, how the whole entire thing ends up panning out. Obviously, Indiana still has to face Penn State. They still have to go on the road to face Maryland as well. But it'll be fun to watch nonetheless. And then you have Mizzou versus Vanderbilt. Bo Pribula, unfortunately, ends up getting hurt. Mizzou ends up falling short. Vandy's now a top 10 team. Like I said, Vandy is kind of the cool Cinderella story that I don't think anybody really expected the last couple of years over college football. I know a lot of people say that Diego Pavia kind of reminds them of a more cocky Johnny Manziel, and honestly, it kind of works. I mean, Vandy is a team that there's expectations, but there's not. Like, they expect him to do good, but it's not like they expect him to win the SEC. It's not like they expect him to go compete for a national title, but it's fun to watch a team like Vandy, kind of be on a roll that they really are and just honestly keep rolling more than anything. One game is a little bit of a disappointment, though, because I expected it to not only be better, but it was also weird how it ultimately ended up. BYU completely dominates Iowa State. They ultimately end up winning 41-27. At first, Iowa State had really firm control over this. It was 17-7 at the end of the first. BYU starts to make a little bit of a comeback. It's 24-17, not terribly bad. And then Iowa State's only able to score 3 points in the second half, and BYU scores, 24 unanswered at that point. So that I'm a little bit disappointed in Iowa State. I kind of expected them to have a bigger year. I expected them to really take a step forward, and unfortunately they ended up ultimately falling short. So really, really surprised that's ultimately the case. The other one, Illinois ultimately falls to Washington. That's also kind of a surprise. Now, to be fair, it is in Washington. That's a hard place to play. I just didn't expect the score to be that bad. One other thing I do want to ask to everybody watching, because now again we have more of a sample size of him. And again, it's been a topic of discussion all year because everybody's kind of up and down. I think now that they're kind of out of everything, potentially, the stories and the storms and whatnot have quelled. What is everybody's thoughts now still on Arch Manning? We have 5 games of hold on. It says recent games. I'm like, wait a minute. They're 6-2. They have played more than 5 games. So we have 8 games of, so far data and looks on Arch so far. So looking at his 8 games, he's 6-2 currently. He's thrown almost 1,800 yards. He's thrown 15 touchdowns. He's got 6 interceptions. and he's also run for 6 touchdowns. So 21 total touchdowns to 6 picks. This last game against Mississippi State, crazy game. Thought Texas was going to lose, honestly, at one point. I'm like, oh, that's going to be really bad if they do that. 29 of 46, almost 350 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick, especially following a really, really ugly game against Kentucky after having all but a perfect game against Oklahoma. I mean, he went 21 of 27 and a touchdown against OU, who has a really great defense, by the way. Follows it up, really bad performance against Kentucky, has to get an overtime win. Follows it up, has another really bad game, not really bad game, but another close game against a really bad team in Mississippi State, and they also have to win in overtime. How are we feeling about Arch so far? Now, here's the other thing that I will say. Up until Florida, he'd only been sacked 3 times. Florida game, he got sacked 6. He only got sacked once in Oklahoma, and then the last 2 games, he's been sacked 3 and 5 times, so he's been sacked 8 times. So he's been sacked 14 times out of just 3 games particularly, which does say a lot about Texas's O-line and how it also needs some patchwork. But now that we have some sample size, how's everybody feel about Arch so far? I'm not completely giving up on him. This is his first true year starting. I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains. We'll definitely have to see what he looks like next year as he comes into his junior year. And again, will there be rumblings of whether or not he'll come out in the draft next year or not? Is there maybe even rumblings? Does he transfer? I don't think either of those things happen, especially with Eli and Peyton as his family and as probably the mentors whispering in his ear. But again, just want everybody's kind of thoughts on Arch. Is he still legit? Is he not? Just got to ask more than anything. And then NFL wise, the Falcons, really, you guys lose to the Dolphins of all teams. Like, the Dolphins are able to score 34 all of a sudden when Mike McDaniel and Tua are both kind of on the hot seat for everything that's happened. Crazy. The Jets, by the way, finally get their first win against the Bengals. Should not have happened because the Bengals had that in firm control. Crazy that the Jets finally are able to get their first win with that. The Ravens ultimately dominate the Bears. A lot of question marks with that. The Texans are able to all but dominate the 49ers. Also a real surprise, especially considering how well Mac Jones has played without Brock Purdy there and whatnot. Dallas gets destroyed by the Broncos. Not super surprised by that, to be 100% honest with you. Daniel Jones and the Colts, especially being here in Indy and whatnot, the hype is real. Everybody's kind of bought in and whatnot. I will say this before I end the show. There's buzzes and there's rumors that the Colts want to sign Daniel Jones to a long-term contract. And I get it. Really good year. Colts are 7-1. They're like the top team in the NFL right now. Like, they're the top team in the AFC. They're definitely the top team in the NFL as a whole. I gotta ask, and I gotta tell if the Colts are listening, or if anybody in the Colts leadership is listening, just pump the brakes, right? He's having a good year. Won't deny that. He's been solid. He's been serviceable, and I will say, no offense to AR, he's been better. And currently, right now, Daniel Jones, he's 4th in passing in the league with over 2,000 yards. He's 13 passing touchdowns, 3 picks. And he's only got 1 rushing touchdown in the last few games so far. So he's got 4 rushing touchdowns. He's got 13 passes. So 17 touchdowns total to 3 picks, over 2,100 yards passing, and not even 100 yards rushing yet. So he's having a good year. I'll say this. Look at what happened last time he got paid, and he got paid by the Giants after having a really good year. Everything went to crap. Now, albeit it is the Giants. Giants O-line has had issues. They've had issues getting weapons for everybody and having issues being able to keep those weapons healthy and moving. Do you really want to potentially sink that type of money into a guy that he's only 28, he's young, but he has had proof of inconsistency and potentially not being a franchise guy? Now, he's in a better situation. He's got players and pieces around him and a good coaching staff. Is that something you're willing to risk as far as paying him a ton of money to see if Daniel Jones is your guy or not for the foreseeable future. I'd say if you do, short contract, like 2-3 years. Don't do anything more. Don't put yourself in a financial cap hole. Don't do that. Just see what you got. Don't do anything crazy. Hey, we're going to give you a couple years, see how you do. If you sustain success, then we'll look at longer and maybe even more money up front because we didn't give you a long-term contract right to boot. I'd be okay with that. But that's just me if I was running things, me personally. But that's my other thoughts. How's everybody feel about the Colts? How's everybody feel about Arch Manning now that we have 8 games of data and 8 games of seeing what he looks like? How's everybody feel about Daniel Jones? Because we also have 8 games of him being with the Colts and being in the Colts offense, having Jonathan Taylor and whatnot. How do we feel about them? But appreciate everybody listening. Thank you for coming to my quote-unquote TED Talk. Please check out all the other great veterans and other great hosts we have here at MBR and whatnot. They're a fantastic organization. Definitely appreciate them hosting. And we will be back next week. Everybody have a great Halloween. Everybody have a great week. And we will see you.
Justice Jackson, they captured Herman Goring alive.
Tell me about him.
He's the face of the Nazis. I'm gonna put Goering on trial.
Edward escapes the hangman's noose.
Very sure of yourself.
No man has ever beaten me.
Goering has to fall.
You don't just have to win, you have to be flawless.
You're walking into a trap.
Knowing what we know now, would you still follow Adolf Hitler?
Nuremberg, rated PG-13, opens November 7th, only in theaters.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we